And
Oh my goodness.
boom!
I am so excited for SPSM, #SPSM, Suicide Prevention Social Media Chat tonight. I'm really excited that we have Sarah Schuster here from the Mighty, because just have been wanting her on for months, ever since I got to meet her. She's just wonderful. And I'm really excited also because it just so happens that the Mighty and one of our former guests from just a couple weeks ago, Hannah Moak from AFSP, did a collaboration after an unfortunate event at Good Morning America. And like we're all ready to talk about it because we're sort of in the, all of our guests are a little in the know today. If you don't know who I am at Doc Foreman. I am a licensed psychologist who also is very passionate about suicide prevention. And we like to chat about suicide prevention, social media, and technology innovations that we think will save lives. And I'm really excited to have some of my favorite people here tonight. First of all, Tony Wood, co-producer. Could you introduce yourself?
Howdy, everybody. Tony Wood, COO Quantify. Just check out ourdatahelps.org. You don't need to look me up. I'm not worth a thing.
And you're the chair of something?
I am the chair of the American Association of Suicidology. It's been the best suicide prevention week ever.
Actually, really has.
Really literally has. That sounded really sarcastic, but the media this year versus last year is off the hook. And the amount of exposure, the amount of back and forth between major outlets is just crazy.
It's wonderful. And one of our guests here is a really important force behind good skillfulness in using social media to talk about suicide and mental health.
She sure is.
Then I also have one of our wonderful producers and co-moderators, Dr. Bart Andrews.
What's going on? Bart Andrews, Behavioral Health Response, Amazing Crisis Agency in St. Louis, Missouri. Excited to be here. Really excited about having Sarah on the show. As I was telling Sarah in the pre-show, on Facebook, people were like, everybody that I was announcing the show to was like, Sarah is awesome. And the Mighty has done so much to create acceptance and fight prejudice and discrimination around mental illness. And it's normalized discussions, and it's a place that I go to because there's always such goodness there. And what was really cool is you did an article. There was an article about like songs that do the best job of fighting mental illness and fighting, helping people not feel alone. That was really cool. I was reading through that. So I'm just really excited about having Sarah and can't wait to hear about all the cool stuff she's doing.
And then finally, I really am excited to talk about our guest tonight. We really got to know Sarah Schuster, us SPSMers, for the first time when Sarah wrote an article about Our Data Helps, which was a wonderful example of SPSM collaborations with guest experts and suicidologists in the field, really innovating and making real a way to get data about people who attempt suicide, people who die by suicide, data that can be used and analyzed and turned around very quickly. Well, in order for us to get data donations, we really had to make people aware of how this worked, and we're trying to figure out how to do things that were well understood by the public. And here are the facts. And as I'm introducing Sarah, this is why I think this is so important. I'm a psychologist. I am not a journalist. I am, we do the show and we do all these other things, but this really actually not my training and not my skill. My skill is actually in clinical interventions. And so to get somebody who really understands social media, who really understands mental health, who really understands how to write about it, we have an exceptional expert, Sarah Schuster. Sarah, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah, and I run the mental health section at the Mighty.
You do more
from Los Angeles right now.
Can you tell everybody what the Mighty is and really explain the concept, because it's amazing.
Yeah, so the Mighty is an online community for people who live with mental illness, but actually also different disabilities, chronic illnesses. We cover kind of a big spectrum of conditions, disorders. And what we basically do is we help people tell their stories. We have a contributor network of like over 3,000 people who send us their stories, who submit their stories through our site. And we help them by editing their stories. We put a nice title on it. We do what we call packaging. We package it, and then we spread it to our community of people who live with these illnesses. And actually the example that I always say when I'm like trying to explain to people what the purpose of the Mighty is that when you're Googling, for example, you've just been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And so you go and you Google bipolar disorder, just been diagnosed. Instead of just getting maybe like WebMD, or maybe instead of just getting like what your symptoms are, you might, hopefully stumble upon a story that's actually called What I Wish I Knew When I Was First Diagnosed with Bipolar Disorder. And then you click on that story, and then you're in the Mighty, and you have access to, hundreds of people who have bipolar disorder telling their different stories from different angles. And that's kind of the purpose we hope to serve, to be the humanizing element of health content, essentially. Yeah, and I get to be a part of it. So we have different editors running different sections, and I get to do the mental health section, which is a lot of fun. And yeah, that's what I do.
So I want to ask you a couple questions before we talk a little bit about some of your specific writing and work.
Yeah.
In the healthcare social media chat sort of group, they a couple of years ago, they started talking a lot about our healthcare organizations writing media content about different disorders and about living with different conditions that would do just what you said, which is you get diagnosed, you Google it, and you want something optimized that is really good quality and that is helpful and that pops up. And what you're saying is, I don't know that it's necessarily the healthcare organizations that are going to get this done. And so, I mean, how did the Mighty assemble itself? Like, because how many years have you guys been writing now?
So the Mighty has existed for a little over 2 years.
Woohoo!
I've been working on the Mighty for a little more than a year, but I've only been doing the mental health section. Actually, by now I've been doing the mental health section for about a year. I actually came on as like a general editor and then started doing the mental health section. And do you mean like how we built a community? Is that what
Yeah, like how did you, because this is something that's really needed, and people have been saying it should be done, but you guys really did it, and you actually have wonderful, vibrant channel.
So what's great about starting a site like this is that, so way back in the beginning, our editor-in-chief, Meg Griffo, who's an amazing editor, I believe that when she was like the sole person on staff, it actually started with her reaching out to people who were already blogging. There are a lot of people who are already talking about their experiences with different conditions, disabilities, you name it. And so what she basically did was, it almost started out as like this curation of the best content online. And so the idea was that you build this content, you build a community, and then everyone kind of gets to see the best of the kind of most useful stuff that's out there when people are blogging anyway. And so in terms of that, when I started the mental health section, it was my job. I saw my job as doing three things. First of all, at that point, we were getting a lot of submissions. Now, when you look at our site, you can find out how to submit your story. So there's literally just people who come to us, and we filter through that. We kind of pick and choose which stories we can put on the site. We put those stories on the site. There's me going out and like looking for like who's like a great person who's talking about mental health right now, like who do I need on the site, and then we'll work with them, and then they'll start writing content for us. And then I mentioned this before in the pre-show, and then we also have this relationship with nonprofits. So that idea is that while you're building a community, so for example, in the beginning, let's say we only had a few hundred people follow the site who had bipolar disorder. If I talk to Heather at the International Bipolar Foundation and say, hey, I have a story, I think people would really like it, and she posts it, all of a sudden, all of their followers who have bipolar disorder are going to see it and know what the Mighty is and hopefully come back to us. So that's kind of the breakdown of how we're building this community. It's a combination of reaching out, obviously now at this point, people coming to us, and then working with nonprofits so that people who have the conditions, who are affected by the conditions, who are following those nonprofits, know who we are, and then maybe they want to join our community. Because obviously nonprofits, they sometimes post stories, but they post a lot of other stuff too. If you just want your kind of stories, then you can follow. Now the Mighty has their mental health page, and Mental Health the Mighty, you can follow that on Facebook, and you'll just see the personal stories of people from like various mental health conditions.
And all, AFSP serves a certain need, and Hannah's expert at advocacy for people who've been affected by suicide, and you're helping people with lived experience tell stories, and there's some overlap in the mission, but it's actually really not the same thing. So it's really makes sense for you to be helping with, and we'll talk more about the writing and the packaging, which you guys are phenomenally skilled at.
Thank you.
Bart, as a person with lived experience and also a professional and also someone who works at a nonprofit, when you first got exposed to the mighty, sorry, I just want to say exposed. When you first became familiar with the mighty, what were some of your reactions to that?
Yeah, so I actually started as a writer for the mighty. I don't know if that's a well-known fact. The first time I was familiar with the mighty was because one of my blogs on the editor-in-chief mag reached out to publish one of my blogs. At the time, I was a senior in college, and I was writing I was a part of the Active Minds chapter at Syracuse University. And I really, because writing was always something I was having a hard time talking about any mental health issues I was going through with my friends, but I always was writing about them. And so I basically started a blog at the Active Minds chapter. And because I posted on Facebook, and Meg, who's editor-in-chief, happened to be a Syracuse alum, she saw the blog, republished it. So my first reaction when I started writing for them was like, this is the only way I can express myself. That was actually my first reaction, just as someone who is a writer and knowing how hard it is to look someone in the eye and talk about what you're going through, but how much easier it was, at least for me personally, to write about what was going on in my head. That was like my first take, was that as on the user end, like, okay, like this is definitely a medium of expression. And then there's also that extra value of having it shared and having people say me too, liking it, sharing it. It's like a beautiful kind of circle of, you get to express yourself, but it's like different than writing a journal. You also get kind of to build a little community around it. And then when I started working there, I think I just loved it. I just wanted to give other people that opportunity. I've always been interested in mental health issues. I'm a journalism major. I was a psychology minor, which means nothing. So all of this, everything that I've learned has been through the mighty.
Oh, wow.
And I basically just became really interested in learning about the different conditions, meeting people. So my like a little bit about my history. My brother actually has OCD, and he's been in and out of treatment centers. He's doing amazing now. But I basically, in school, because I didn't have a community to talk to about this with, I was really craving a community of people who would understand. So it was both the people who had lived experience, also people talking about what it's like having mental illness in the family. I think that when you're in a situation where things are tough, like you want to information gather. And so through this job, I feel like every day I'm kind of helping, whether it's what I see my brother going through, what I'm personally going through, I can kind of like take in what others are saying, and it helps me as well. So I think it's, as an editor now, I have a more well-rounded perspective on what the health community is talking about, what they might need. I'm like honored to get to help that. And then also from a personal perspective, I get to also kind of, I get to share my story in the process as well, which is great.
I'm so glad to hear about your brother.
Yeah.
My mother has depression. Yes, absolutely. I completely understand.
Yeah, and that's the thing, there's two parts of it. There's being the person, also being like the family member of, which are two worlds I think come together really nicely at the Mighty.
You do a wonderful job. Bart, I've seen you all over the Twitter feed. Tell us a little bit about some of your thoughts.
Well, we got a couple of things to declare. First of all, Doc Foreman, your eyebrows tonight are on point. So that's on the third. Second point, Sarah, the thread is blowing up. People love you. They love the Mighty. And so we just got to talk. I'm not yeah, you can't. It's like boom. I can't even keep up with it, which is awesome. 3, a little bit of a longer story here, but I want to connect some dots. I saw Kevin Berthia speak for the first time on Friday.
Wow.
No, it was Thursday. I saw Kevin Briggs and Kevin Berthia on Thursday. And one of the things that Kevin Berthia, do you know Kevin at all, Sarah? Have you met Kevin Berthia? Because he's amazing. So there's 3 Kevins connected with the Golden Gate Bridge. The amazing Kevin Hines, Kevin Briggs, the officer who's amazing, and Kevin Berthia. I don't understand the Kevins in the bridge, but we got 3 of them. So one of the things that Kevin said, of all the goodness that he said, is that even after his attempt, it was 8 years before he's talked about it publicly, right? 8 years. And one of the things that he said that hit me like a ton of bricks, I was sitting there and it mirrored my own story so well. He said he didn't feel the burden of his attempt lift off of him until he told his story publicly, right?
Yeah.
Until he actually said it to other people in a front of only then was it real, and only then could he accept himself. And for me, it's really interesting because my own path in telling my story, it took me 16 years to tell my story. And I couldn't in any way have any peace with myself until it came out, until the story was out of me. And so that's one of the things as you're talking, as you're telling your story, and the Mighty is encouraging people to tell their stories, we're bringing validation to people at a level and self-acceptance at a level that is incredibly powerful. Because before we can get other people to be comfortable with us, we got to be comfortable with ourselves. And for us to do that, we have to tell our story. And I think that's one of the things the Mighty does so well is it provides this beautiful voice, and it amplifies that voice for a group of us that have been so disenfranchised and so crapped on by the world, right? That here's a place where people get to tell their story. So each time somebody does it on the Mighty, somebody else is gaining their voice and being able to be okay with themselves, which helps each person that it helps thousands of people. And so I just want to say thank you for everything the Mighty is doing. And that's why having on the show is such a big deal to us in the community. It's so incredible.
Thank you, Bart. Thanks a lot.
Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about how we connected and how we did the Our Data Help story, just so that you can and use that maybe as a way to describe like the process of finding stories that you think people are going to care about and connect with?
Yeah, so I believe I first heard of ourdatahelps.org when you were talking to me about the show, right? Because I think that you had connected through our founder, Mike Porath, and he connected, he texted you to me. And I remember, I actually remember really well, I was sitting in the conference.
And we've had a little bit of a lag, so we may have a little bit of a freeze, Tony, because it's frozen on the screen.
Their data.
Oh, she's back.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, should I start over?
You have to go back. So you were at the conference and thought.
And as we were, I think, wrapping up talking about the actual chat, you were just rattling off some of the amazing other things that were going on. And I remember being like, wait a second, like, stop, like, what was that? And you said, like, we're developing this thing. It's like already, we're trying to get in front of people where people can actually donate their data. And the reason why that stuck out to me is because I know that when you're affected by suicide, any issue, you want to, the one thing you want to do is like, how can I help? It is actually what you ended up saying in an interview, how people who are affected by suicide, people who are in the community, I think that social media, as great as it is, and even as great as storytelling is, and I always think about this, like, as I'm doing my job, it's also really important to understand its limitations, right? So storytelling it's such an important tool. Not playing alone is such an important tool. But it can't, there's also this factor, it's a great way to bring action, but it is not in itself always an action, especially when we're talking about suicide prevention. It can be sometimes. Not that it can't be never, but it's definitely, like, there's nothing like something where you can actually donate your data and know that's being used for suicide prevention. That personally, as somebody who like agonizes about like the limitations of storytelling every day, because that's just how my mind works, the fact that it was such like a solid thing that I could do that I know is helping the community, that doesn't involve necessarily like, God, you put out a piece about suicide prevention, you think, I hope someone reads this when they need it. You play the SEO game, you do everything you can to get in front of people, but it's really hard to guarantee that.
Some of our viewers, say what you mean by you play the SEO game, because we do that here, so that people can find our content, and you do it really well.
So you play the SEO game, so when people so SEO, search engine optimization, are basically keywords you put within your piece, hoping that when people are, essentially, you want people to be able to Google your piece. That's what it comes down to. You want, when people search, God, like reasons to not kill myself, I want to kill myself, you want positive content to be the first thing that they see. So you can do that, you can do all these things, and we know this, we do our best, we're all just doing our best. But something that is such like an easy thing for people to do that has an impact, I was like, this is something, I was telling you guys before, like this is something that I want people to know about. And that's how I knew it was a good story, because it was an easy thing. It was something that everyone has, social media. That's something that everyone has. And for anybody who's ever wondered, like, what more can I do? it was an easy thing for them to do. So when we're talking about framing, I believe we framed it like you can now donate your social media for suicide prevention research. It's so beautiful. It's so easy. You click into the piece, not because like you want to like necessarily learn more, but because you want to do it, because you're saying, wait a second, like, is this something that I can do? You click into the piece, you know, you read through the story, and then you're hopefully even more motivated to actually do it and donate your data. So that was the story behind that. And that was kind of the first time we collaborated, because I was just very passionate about what you guys doing. And I knew that people, and what the Mighty is interesting because we're the media, but we're the media for people with mental illnesses, right? Or survivors, or people who are impacted the community. So whenever I'm choosing a story, I'm not just thinking like, do people care about this? It's more, do people in the mental health community care about this? And it was just such an easy win that people in the mental health community would care about a simple thing they could do for suicide prevention. So that was that story. And then I think it did well. It helped get the word out. And I was like, I was happy with it. You guys were a beautiful character. I got to interview. You guys were beautiful characters to interview.
So tell us about that. So,
add some narrative.
So then you're like, you want to do the story. And we're like, hell yes. Because we went and looked at your content, and we're like, this is amazing. Like, I was so excited about like how good you are. I mean, sometimes you just know quality when you see it, and then you're contacting all of us. And by the way, Sarah does lovely interviews, and you actually interviewed a lot of people. And then we'll talk about, tell us about that process, and tell us about how you package things, because that's really important, why and how you do that.
Yeah, so interview. I love interviewing people. It's my favorite. I really do. Just because I think if I stare at a computer screen all day, to get to like talk to a person, I think it's just personally really nice. So basically, especially when you're doing a story like ourdatahelps.com, the premise is there. What I wanted was the why. I wanted the narrative behind the site itself. I think people are really, people like a backstory, especially one they can relate to. And so I believe when I was talking to you guys, I remember at one point, I remember doing one interview and actually thinking like, I actually have enough, like I have everything I need technically. But then I had an interview with you, Doc Foreman, and I was like, okay, but one more interview, we'll see what else we can get. And then from you, I ended up focusing less on the technicality and focusing more on the story behind it. And that was, I think, what made that story really special, because it did have, I believe it's open. There is some kind of sense of narrative in the beginning where people understand how the story started. It started with a mom who wanted to know what she could do, which, again, the community can relate to. And from there, it was as simple as getting
I remember that. And the experience of being with you, I remember, like, when you asked, and you're like, how did this happen? And, why do people care? Like, what's it like to talk to somebody in like the days after somebody's died? And, and I remember, cause you can rattle off these great projects, but I remember it like things became very stopped and very focused. Like I felt like you had gotten to that moment and you distilled it very well. And I have to tell you, I've changed the way that I talk about it because of the way you asked me that question.
That's really cool.
Oh, so anyway, so then you write the story.
So I write the story, and then I have to put a head on it, which is a headline, and also a status, which you find is equally important when you're packaging for the internet. And this, we can use a story as an example, but it really, it's kind of the game you play with every story that we get. And the fact of the matter is, whether you like it or not, people are going to get your content through social media, and you're competing with everything they're scrolling through, and you have to give them a reason to click. And we talk about the opposite idea of clickbait. I think clickbait has a really bad name because some clickbait is bad, and so rightfully so. But we always talk about the opposite, about how it's not that you're tricking someone to click into something that's not a big deal. Headlines, like I see headlines like, so-and-so said this like groundbreaking thing about anxiety, and then as you click in, it's a celebrity who says like, I experience anxiety. Like I consider that to be a little clickbaity when you're doing the sensational title to get people into your story, and then there's like 15 ads on the site, and cha-ching, they just made a bunch of money. So what we do is that we just consider the fact that, okay, someone's scrolling, why would they click on this story? why would they want to engage with this story? And so when it came down to this story, it was a very easy thing for me to figure out, because I'm like, okay, people who care about the story, they need to click in because they need to find out how they can donate their data. It was as simple as that. So to have a bold headline that laid it out, which we don't always do, in this case it worked really well. And then I'm trying to think of what the status was. There's probably some, I'm looking at it right now. I forget what this, it might have been like a call to action status about how easy it was. We essentially played into what was interesting about the piece and brought that forward. So there was no, people, especially with personal stories, people don't want to have to try to guess what you're talking about. They really want to be intrigued and know enough that they know that if they click on this, they're going to get value from it. So that's how we went about. I think the news stories are a little different than the contributor stories, but it was pretty apparent from the beginning that the appeal of the story was going to be people who click on it are going to want to know how they can donate their data.
So that brings us to a question from the Twitter feed, which was one of our people said, so then did we have any noticeable change in donation after the story went hot? Mr. Tony Wood.
We sure did. It was a huge spike for probably 2 weeks solid.
Awesome.
And we've seen sort of perennial, each time the story gets reshared in another outlet, it keeps on, it's a gift that keeps on giving.
Good.
I mean, that's like, we're talking about journalism that sort of helps keep people informed, that calls people to action, that contributes to understanding suicide in a way we can understand it before. And this isn't something that took $1 million of grant money and paid researchers and a ton of oversight. This was a very agile thing where, a few SPMers get together, this platform's built, we share it, share it with your expertise, and then suddenly there's data to work on.
I wouldn't want to misrepresent it because Quantify did spend a tremendous amount of resources on it.
Heavy lifting, yes.
So it's not cheap. But we paid for it because we thought it was a good idea. And we believe in it. We believe in it for a lot of reasons. Some of them are super boring and sciencey, but a lot of them are super boring and sciencey, frankly. But we believe in it. We believe that this is what we can do to help push the field forward. But I don't want to suggest to the audience that it's cheap, because it isn't. It's really hard to do, and it's really hard to operate. It's a magical thing, but it's not cheap.
That the effort to get that kind of data manually would not cheap, but many multipliers more expensive for probably not as much data.
Yeah,
it was incredibly efficient. So I'm not saying cheap, but maybe efficient. It was incredibly efficient use of resources. Yeah. And what I think is interesting is that somebody with Sarah's skills, who understands how to package things and how to package call to action, can have real impact on things that scientists can study to prevent suicide. I mean, and where we can draw a really clear through line. That is what I think the most concrete case for why this sort of skill set is valuable. Bart, can you check in with us and tell us I haven't been able to look at the feed too much.
Well, so the feed's just popping, so it's really hard to keep up. One, I want to send out major love to the Blackmans, because they're honoring the anniversary of their daughter's death to suicide. So they just sent in a chat, and I want to say, hey, we're behind you guys. We love you. And so that's really important. They're an important part of our community, and I want to honor that. Folks love the Mighty, and they love talking about Our Data Helps, because that whole story is about action. Right? About how awareness led to action. Awareness, and I think Sarah hit this, this is so important. And the research on this is really clear. Awareness for awareness' sake is useless, right? You can do all of the promotional stuff you want to. If there isn't some call to action and some resources behind that call to action, or some step that you can take, or you're not giving people some tools to use, you're not accomplishing much. And I know some folks love to put out the suicide data. How many people were losing to suicide? Oh, we're losing. What good is that doing if you're not giving somebody something to do with that information? And so it really, I think one of the things that you're hitting on, and April is always talking about
effectiveness, right?
Well, how are we being effective? How do we know we're being effective? And are we being strategic with our messaging, right? And so storytelling helps, and storytelling can lead to action, and it does save lives, but storytelling isn't enough in and of itself. Right. I do like lived experience narratives much more than the general blah, blah about suicide, because people make an emotional connection. And looking through the site, The Mighty, you guys do a beautiful job of connecting the visual with the words, and you use headlines that catch people's attention and that are edgy. Like there's the story about the response to whoring out your undiagnosed mental illness. Right? There are many, many, many sites that would stay away from that. Oh my God, we can't use the word whoring and mental illness and friggin' knock off the crap. Because, and I said this last week with knock off the shit. What it's crap, baby language. Look, we have been playing it safe. And I'm sorry, safe ain't working, because if safe was working, we wouldn't have a 25-30% increase in suicide, right? So it's time that we start using the tools that we know that work, start thinking about, and what I like this theory of mind that you guys have. You sit down and you think about what's going to draw somebody's attention. Would this draw my attention? Not, I really want to get this out. Notice that this is what's really key. And it's the difference between people who know how to present information and those who like to just present information. Because sometimes those two people are the same, and a lot of times they're not, right? But when you sit down and think about what do people want to know, will they be interested in this? What do we need to do to make it interesting? That's really what lived experience is about, right? And you're placing yourself in your audience's shoes, and you can see that going through the site. The pictures are beautiful, the headlines grab you, and this is what's so powerful about what you guys are doing, and it's just amazing.
Wonderful, wonderful sum up, Bart. Exactly about that. The people really do want action, and they want headlines that they can connect with. And there's the Mighty's skillfulness, their editor's skillfulness, Sarah's skillfulness, really, really works. And we're going to talk a little bit about what happened at Good Morning America this week, because I mean, this is going to be a really good example, a sort of an unfortunate event that involves Hannah Moak, who was our guest from 2 weeks ago, and Sarah. Believe it, we scheduled these folks months ago. We had no idea that these events were going to unfold this week. By the way, just for our folks who are watching, we are on YouTube Live. This is our first week switching platforms. There's a chat feature. I'll go try to check that out. But while I try to make the technology work, Bart, if you and Sarah could talk a little bit about what happened with Good Morning America this week, because that was holy bucket.
Yeah. What was really cool about this is that actually I found out about it from Hannah Moak, right? Because I got this tweet from Hannah saying, hey, would you please check this out? That's why I love SPSM. That's why I love Twitter, because I was so involved in so many other things this week that I might have missed it. But Hannah sent this alert out, hey, would you guys take a look at this and let folks know about it? So I'm reading the story and I'm like, you've got to be freaking kidding me. Are you serious? I mean, I couldn't even believe that it happened. And so, Sarah, if you want to tell folks, I think some folks know, but I would love for you to use your words and describe what happened.
Yeah, so for people who are unfamiliar with the story itself, essentially, Suicide Prevention Week last week, a bunch of people from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, including Hannah, including, I think it was staff and also just people who are supporters, showed up to Good Morning America. And there's actually on the photo, on the piece itself, there's this beautiful picture of them all with their Stop Suicide shirts, holding signs, thinking that Good Morning America, because they will talk to the crowd, is going to give them a second to say some things about suicide awareness and prevention, considering it's Suicide Awareness Week. And what ended up happening instead was that, and we don't know who this was, it must have been a producer's decision, but whoever actually approached them, whether it's a producer, whether they said an intern, we don't actually know, but someone went up to the group of people with the suicide prevention shirts and swag and said, you guys need to get out of the camera site. We're not going to feature you. And the exact quote, and I believe it was, I think I'm going to get this right, it was something like, it's the top of our morning show, nobody wants suicide on the brain. It was something like that. So the way it was handled, it was like a double whammy of it, of literally, like, if you think of like a literal act of suicide being pushed aside, it happened literally. And then also the kind of insensitive way it was handled was also super off-putting. And so the story behind that piece being on the Mighty, you're talking about Hannah. I'm so glad I watched the episode because Hannah Moak, now I know how to say her name. Totally would have gotten it wrong. But Hannah Moak, who's my friend at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, she just sent us the story that their vice president of research, I believe, it was somebody who did more on like the research side of the foundation, wrote, and it's a great piece for so many reasons. And when she asked me if I wanted to have on the site, I was like, yes. I immediately knew it was like going to be a thing, right? Because there's so many elements of it. There's the fact that it's Good Morning America. There's the fact that it confirms a lot of what we're saying. The fact that I think that for me, actually, I don't know if you guys feel like this, because I'm so in the mental health world, I sometimes get surprised when people like just don't talk about mental illnesses all the time, right? Like I think I'm a little naive because I'm so in it that I'm still surprised when things like this happen. So it had that element of kind of proving that there's still work to be done when it comes to preventing suicide. And what I really liked about the piece, and I did want to say this, is that it wasn't a smear campaign against Good Morning America. It was it said what happened, but the piece itself was like a very thoughtful breakdown of what this event says more on like a societal level. So which made me really comfortable publishing it, right? Because there wasn't a mean tone. It was more like, this is what happened. Here's what we can learn from it. And we published it, and it went, and people picked up on it, and it ended up doing really, as soon as we published it was like,
your site was freezing up.
Exploded. Our site shut down. I don't know if it was directly because of that. I think it was an unfortunate coincidence. But our site was down for like,
went and checked Reddit. I was like, what? Did they get on Reddit?
No. I don't think anything happened in particular, but our site actually went down. Then it went back up, and then we kind of got more momentum. But it ended up, it was great. I mean, it started this hashtag. If you look at the hashtag suicide on the brain, I've been noticing, it's a whole different discussions, but it's a lot of suicide law survivors kind of saying like, suicide on the brain, like I've had suicide on the brain since, my loved one passed away, blah, blah, blah. It's a really beautiful thread to go through. And so it's actually a great example of not only a story bringing an incident to light, but also just because I think how the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention ended up handling it, it also became a very productive conversation of not just like, boycott GMA, more like, okay, like what can this teach us? There's still more work to be done. Suicide still makes people uncomfortable. And yeah, we'll see what happens. I hope they apologize. Yeah,
what was it?
All I wanted them to apologize, and to even have a segment, like, you know what I mean? Like for me, like I think that this deserves people from that foundation getting on the show and getting some time. I don't know. We'll see.
Did people from Fox then, like interview somebody? Like there was like some other news outlet then like did talk about suicide, right?
Oh, you mean on that morning or because of the event?
It was like on Fox. It was like on a Fox channel. Like
probably.
So someone was tweeting out, and then I couldn't find it because I just want to say this has been the best year ever for social media and Suicide Prevention Month because there's just been so much which has been fabulous. Right. But so apparently in the middle of that, because I kept trying to follow all of the hashtag suicide on the brain tweets, and whatever you and Hannah cooked up, like that flew, and it was going for a couple of days. Plus your site was getting a lot of traffic. You had, I don't even know, has anyone looked about how many, like I saw it was like over 14,000 shares when I had last looked at it, but it had been a minute.
Yeah, I haven't looked recently. It definitely has like more than 100,000 page views. Like when I was looking at it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's big. That big because when a story takes off like that, it just keeps going. Even if it's like, like slowly building throughout the day. A lot of eyes saw that article. And it's a perfect combination of, again, like of us having the platform, but of ASFP having this beautiful community that really cares. And when I think first that we tweeted it, mental health page posted it, then the American Foundation posted it, and then it was like it just like to have like three kind of like Facebook page powerhouses like posted at once. it was glorious and all came together, the Twitter stuff. I hope that something good comes out of it because, man, and I always think, when I always go back to that picture of them all like so excited to say something. I hope that they feel like some good has come out of that experience, because I'm sure that they were very disappointed and they woke up early. Just everything about the experience just breaks my heart. So I'm happy that we got to be a place where that kind of conversation could launch. It worked out really
You're at
well.
like 32,000 shares.
Yeah.
We're talking about social media. Like, this is super inside baseball. This is one organization sort of at this one sort of moment. And in the past, if Good Morning America had said, shut it down and no, you're not going to be on because nobody wants suicide on the brain in the morning, that'd be it. Instead, what happened is that the way that social media works, if you have this wonderful collaboration, and Sarah, you said a big part of your job is having these relationships and having a certain set of editorial and packaging skills, plus having a very active, well-tended community. And there were a couple, and you guys knew how to chain it together. So this event happens, and Good Morning America may not feature you, but you guys can then do something with that, which before we would have been powerless, right?
Yeah, totally. And it has a lot to do, so when I was thinking of packaging that piece, for example, although the piece itself is like very thoughtful and has like a lot more, like we knew just from my experience, like to pull out, so that the title of that piece is When Good Morning America Staff Shut Down Suicide Awareness. And so we knew by like highlighting that moment and pulling into the staff familiar name, kind of like a provocative thing, like what does that mean? It's not untrue. We intentionally said good morning staff because we're talking about this in the newsroom. Like we understand that they're not trying to bring down Good Morning America, and the distinction between Good Morning America, shut down suicide prevention, and Good Morning America staff. What happened? A member of the staff made a call, shut it down. That's kind of where that head came from. And I think what we get to do from somebody who has experience with packaging, we get to help them spread their story, not just because of the community, but because we had experience with titling things. I pulled out the quote that was actually said as the status. And when you look at it all together, you can see okay, if you care about suicide, even if you don't care about suicide, and you're just about Good Morning America, you might be like, what does that mean? You click on it, and then you end up with a moment that really happened, and then a thoughtful discussion that also at the end leads to a call to action where you can hashtag, suicide on the brain. So yeah, that was another great example that just happened last week. Yeah.
Yeah, it happened in the middle of the week, and you guys did an amazing job. And it's still being shared. It's had over double the share since I looked at it. I don't even think 24 hours ago, which I think is pretty amazing. And you're also telling a really important narrative that I really want to get out there to, especially suicide prevention professionals, especially those who are nonprofits, is that having somebody who's really skilled in media and specifically social media, how to write the title, because you're telling us that how you wrote the title was provocative and also accurate and also led to shares. When I put that on my Facebook page, I get some shares for things, but that's not what I'm usually doing on Facebook. But I had 20 or 30 shares of that. And it was how you guys crafted it specifically so that it would be evocative, people would click on it, people would feel accurately the impact of that event and then take some action. And a lot of people went on Twitter with the hashtag suicide in the brain and said, Good Morning America, this deserves to be told, which is awesome. Anyway, super thrilled. Bart's giving me the grin.
So no, well, I thought the response in the community was amazing. It was empowering, but I think I'm going to be unkind about this. It shows how disempowered we are as a community. If this had been done to people who were fighting cancer, if this had been done to rape victims who had stopped rape, sure, the outcry, the public outcry, there would have been an apology within 24 hours, right? So this is what's really interesting to me. Despite the fact that our community handled this really well and we got a lot of traction, it shows how this is a civil rights issue. And it's really interesting because I've had several battles with people and professionals. They don't get that the issue that we have around suicide and fighting mental illness is at its heart a civil rights issue, right? It's a disenfranchised, oppressed group, and we're treated differently. And I have a test that's easy to use. Anytime mental health's involved, take the mental health phrase out and put cancer into it and see if it works the same, right? And that's how you get at the bias that we fight every single day. And the bias is so intense that this media source had no qualms about shutting it down, nor did they even apologize, nor was there this massive millions of folks boycotting the channel, because that's how disenfranchised we are as a group. So one, it's cool that there's progress, but it's also very telling about how far down the pole we really are when it comes to the power that we have socially to make change around suicide, right?
Yeah.
Right. And what do you think about that, Sarah? What are your thoughts? As I spit that out, what do you think?
No, that was great. And actually what I was going to say is that I think that another thing I think about a lot, that there's so much content, especially on mental health. There's a lot of mental health content being made. Although it's good that we're talking to each other, it's also like not enough. And I think that's kind of what you were getting at. Like, it's great that the fact that we have a community and we're strong and people no longer feel like it's really easy for someone who's diagnosed with depression to go online and know they're not the only one. It's pretty easy for that now. And so I think about this a lot, kind of what the next step is for mental health advocacy. Because I do think, and I don't know if it's like, maybe it's too early, I don't know if it's a time, but I do think that we're going to get to the point where saying that you are not alone, which is kind of like a huge thing that people say, which is kind of a great mantra and it's important, it's like not going to be enough. And what's next? And what you talk about discrimination, replacing the word stigma with discrimination and getting to the actual issues in our health system and in our policies that are screwing people over, that's like actually where I see the community going. I don't know when. I'm excited about it. And again, not to devalue stories for the sake of stories, not to devalue the fact that we have to know that we're not alone, but I think that jumping into this community and already seeing when I got here, so I've only been really active in this for a year, right? And so to see how big it was when I first got here, and to see kind of how it's like already growing, I'm really excited for that next step. So for example, just like you said, like it's the fact that we have a hashtag, it's great. Like people need to feel like their voices are being heard, but it's not enough when it comes down to actual discrimination. It's not enough to be heard by each other, because nothing's going to change. The people who are running the big media outlets, the people who are making laws, giving out healthcare, they're the ones who need to hear it. So it's like I think about it's like, how do we get that message in front of them, not just to each other? It's a good place to start, but I don't know. I'm excited.
I'm excited to hear what you're going to come up with, and I'll put the camera to Bart.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, Sarah, and I think there was so much goodness in what you just said. Moving away from stigma, because stigma language is stigmatizing, and it detracts from oppression, and it detracts from the things that are happening. It detracts from discrimination, and so people love to say the word stigma. Oh, the stigma. This quit saying stigma and talk about discrimination, because that's what the hell's going on. It's discriminatory behavior, and we need to call it out. The other thing that I absolutely love about what you're saying is you've only been involved with this for a year, and you're having a bigger impact, right, than people who've been involved in suicide prevention for their entire career, right? And that is something that's really, really important to point out, because people play it safe and they stay in their community. And you hit the other thing that's a huge bone of contention for me is often we're preaching to the choir. Right? We're all galvanized with each other. Boy, we're all, and it's going nowhere. We've got to start making inroads. And I see the same problem in diversity movement. If you're only talking to people that already agree with you, if we're not engaging people who don't agree with us, who aren't motivated, we're not going to make any traction. And so I would love to hear what your ideas are. What do you think are and April, I know might have been going here. So if I'm stealing your thunder, April, I'm sorry. What are steps that we can take to get outside of preaching to the choir and actually engage people in action that aren't already engaged?
Yeah, so that makes me think back to something Tony said when he was talking about OurDataHelps.org, and he was talking about how there's all this boring technical stuff that like no one cares about, blah blah blah. Okay, so like you guys were saying, like you guys are the people like doing the work. You're the psychologist, you're the clinical, you're like the people in it. There needs to be more people on the outside who are relaying that information to everybody, not just people in the mental health community, to everyone. So something I'm really passionate about and something that I hope to do more are breaking down complicated things. So for example, there's a mental health bill like that's waiting to be seen by the Senate. Like, do people know about that? Do they know what it involves? Like, do people have opinions about it? What do people think about that? Something that I would love to do more of is getting that information in front of everybody. And taking it smaller, being like, because the mental health, it's hard to talk about the mental health system because it's different state by state. So making sure people know like what exactly they're getting themselves into. Like we say the mental health system broken. Like what does that mean? I actually, so what content I'm craving to produce and that I think it's missing are more breakdowns of the actual issues that we face. That's I don't know much farther than that, but just the idea that there are complicated issues, discrimination,
like the legislation affects us, how insurance regulates care that people can get to affects us, research, how we classify disorders affects us. These things all affect that when you are not well and you have a mental illness and you need to get care for that, there's a whole bunch of things that impact your chances of recovering. And some of that is inside of you, but there's a bunch of big system things that people don't understand very well. Yes. And Sanjay Gupta is going to explain about the latest bionic arm on CNN, but will he explain how this mental health bill is going to impact your ability to get the antidepressant that works for you?
Totally, and that's what I think it is. I think that as a whole, our community needs to start being more specific, and that when I hear the mental health system is broken, because I've heard it so many times now I want to know exactly how. And I want people who are smart, who both, who are affected by it, and all people in the community to be more loud about what exactly we need. Just like Bart said, like, that the word stigma, it's important to get the conversation started, but I do think that I was biggest suicide prevention week ever. Like it's not that the conversation is not happening. It's more about like, are we going to say the same things over and over again? Or are we going to start getting more specific and start targeting people who need to hear it? That's where I hope is the next step. And I do hope the Mighty will be a place where we can start doing more of that. Right now I think I'm spending every day managing our community of a lot of contributors. And right now I think that we're pretty small staff right now, and the fact that we've grown at a pretty high pace. So right now we're all kind of, although the Mighty is growing, we're also still kind of just like managing, like just trying to get contributor stories out, trying to respond to people. I do think that when we have a bigger staff and all of that is settled, I don't have to worry about all the contributors that I haven't gone back to, because I'm sure if there are people listening that I haven't emailed back. I'm so sorry. It's like my submissions email is is a mess. But the point is that I do believe the Mighty, and that hopefully more sites like the Mighty, once we kind of get a hold of our contributor network, we can start thinking a little more like that, of getting, I've been recently trying to get on people who are more professionals, people who are more, people who are advocates to kind of break down.
Or the Muppet Show of suicide prevention.
Yes, or you guys, exactly. Exactly. Anyway, to hear more voices, So I think, for example, when we're talking about numbers, anxiety content does well. It does well, but BuzzFeed is making anxiety content. Mike.com, everyone is making anxiety content. But the Mighty, what I'm proud about is that we don't just have anxiety content. We have people with borderline personality disorder writing about their stories.
Yes.
We have mothers of people whose son has schizophrenia, who's having a hard time finding a place to house him, writing for the Mighty. So we have we have a variety, and I hope that the kind of stuff that kind of gets pushed away by maybe the more viral story also gets to go to the forefront. But I think there's a lot of potential for us to be doing not just the viral, relatable stories, but to also be doing kind of the issues that get tucked aside, because those are the people who need it more. Not need it more, but those are the people who aren't being represented right now in other.
I have a standard rant about the fact that our system is not broken, but it's the system that we asked for and that we demanded. and it's not right. It's not what we want, but it is the system that we demanded. But I have a question for you before we run out of time.
Oh.
Okay.
And
I know it's happening. We're almost to
what do
final
you
thoughts.
do when stories don't go very well? Like, we've talked about all the stuff that we love the most about Mighty, about the Mighty, and I'm really interested how you manage things when you don't get the reaction you're looking for, or you get a totally different reaction that was totally unexpected, that you weren't prepared to get, or what do you do with the stuff that is not as, that doesn't really work? I mean, what do you do?
Yeah, so I think that I haven't had a piece yet. When we talk about like not working, not every story goes viral. Not every story gets a large people, but what I think that's something that the Mighty tries to do is that we at least try to get it in front of the right people. So I guess to answer your question, if there's a story, so I'll give a specific story about a parent of someone with a serious mental illness. That's not going to be a widely received story. But that story isn't a failure because hopefully the people who need to see the story will see it and will be empowered to make more noise. So that's why we work with nonprofits. That's why I try to work with other organizations. And that's why we do publish stories to our community. Because even though a story doesn't go viral, it doesn't mean that it can't help somebody. I hope that's what you're asking. Everything. Yeah, everything has value. It's just about getting in front of the right people and like hoping that they can see it.
It shows so much in your work that you are mission driven and that you do your very best to balance the interest and the needs of all of as much of the community as you can possibly embrace. You're just constantly embracing all the time. And it's beautiful work. The other part of it is not as pertinent, but it's how do you manage when people have violently negative reactions? Like, what do you do with that? What does the community do with it? Because you can't do it by yourself. It has to be something the community does.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of an example that I can answer to that. I don't mean negative reaction.
You can Twitter it out later if it comes to you. It's not a thing right now.
No, it's okay.
You can Twitter it out later. I don't know that you've had a lot of that on that channel. Things go really well there.
Yeah. So in the mental health section, I can't say I've had a story that has gotten. I think I just learn as I go. I don't think I've ever had. So I'll say this. I've never had a story like people like flipped out because it was like somehow bad or wrong or harmful, but I have had like little hints that people have dropped me that have modified so for example, a great example is that we have this writer who wrote a piece about self-harm, and in it she mentions blood. She actually talks about getting them stitched up, so it's a little graphic. And she wrote to me after the piece got published and said, hey, I actually think this piece should have a trigger warning on it because I know that for me, so it wasn't necessarily, so I don't have a good example of, I mess up. It's not that like I never mess up, but I can't think of a good example of like there would be an outcry, but every time I like make a mistake like that, I learn. And so now that I know, okay, so now I know that I should probably be putting this kind of language on self-harm stories. That's like the best example, just like listening to the community, reading the comments, and kind of seeing the feedback that I've been getting and kind of modifying how I edit, how I frame around that. And there hasn't been, like, I've been lucky, there hasn't been, because I'm such a newbie, I'm lucky there hasn't been a huge outcry. A lot of it's a lot of gut. I also read a lot. I also make sure that I have read and like have highlighted like how to report about suicide, like all those rules that, and eating disorders, for example, like making sure that I know how to report about eating disorders. So I have a lot of resources that I can use to prevent that from happening. But I really try to listen to the community, listen to their feedback. And we're not a perfect site. I've definitely, I've had to learn, a big thing I've had to learn actually, something I used to do a lot when I first started out was over editing. I think that if something made me uncomfortable, my first instinct was to like want to like delete it from like from the story. If maybe there was a mention of like self-harm, but the story wasn't about self-harm. Little things that I did when I was first starting out. And I've had to learn over time that to question when something makes me uncomfortable, like, okay, this makes me uncomfortable because it's uncomfortable, which is okay, or is it actually going to be something that's like triggering the community? So I've had to like walk that fine line, and I know thankfully we haven't had something where something's gone terribly wrong. But I do make sure to have my eyes out just in case, and I try to modify as I go.
I was sort of surreptitiously prompting you to explain what I already knew, and that is that you're brilliant, but you pay attention, you're listening. And that's something that our community has trouble with, because people have a tendency to produce content and throw it out there, and then they're like, oh, it didn't really work, so then they're just burned.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that it's a two-way street. It's synchronous. It's not.
So we have blown right through final thoughts.
Sorry.
And this is because I can't keep up with all of the chatter. So this is at Doc Foreman. Final thoughts. We're going to do them like really, really quick. Final thought for the evening. People with expertise in social media and journalism know how to write and how to collaborate and how to amplify messages effectively that matter. And they are thinking strategically, long-term, not just about how to talk to ourselves loudly about suicide, but how to create change. And I think that's amazing. Bart, final thoughts.
Very quick final thoughts. A huge thank you, Sarah. A huge thank you to the Mighty for providing a voice for the community that is amplifying and empowering in this community. It's absolutely incredible. And thank you for sharing your expertise. I learned a lot about messaging tonight, and the level of expertise you have, do not take it for granted. It's huge.
Oh my God.
And you helped us tremendously. And you got a question from Tony Wood late in the show. That almost never happened. That was amazing.
Good to know.
Final thoughts from you, Tony Wood.
We're totally out of time. Go check out the Mighty and join AAS.
Yes.
Sarah, final thoughts from you.
Yeah, my final thoughts are thank you to my community. Thank you to my writers. I feel, I don't know, sorry, we don't have a lot of time, but the Mighty could not be who we are without people who give me their words to edit and trust me to package it, to have it on the Mighty.
Wow.
Yeah, I love, like, I have a deep love for my contributors. They're the reason why I love my job, and every email interaction I have, every time I get to publish one of their stories is an honor. So whoever is writing for us, thank you so much. And if you want to write for us, mentalhealth@themighty.com is the email where you can get to me. And so if you want to submit your story, it's as easy as that. Just tell me what you want to talk about, and we can hopefully get it on the site.
This is at Doc Foreman. mentalhealth@themighty.com is how you get submissions to Sarah Schuster, journalist extraordinaire. Hop on over to hashtag SPSM Unpacked. They're doing a fabulous recap of the show. We could have gone another half hour. This was amazing. Thank you so much to Sarah. Thank you to Sean. Thank you to Bart, Tony, the many people who make these great conversations happen. And Hannah, we see you. We love you. Everyone, bye.
Good night, everybody.
Bye, everybody.